Hey everyone, welcome to Everyday Infertility. This is your host, Savannah Keys. Today I am with Cousins with a Cause. So, as you can tell by their name, they are actually cousins, and I have Rebecca and Maddie here. So, just a quick background on Cousins with a Cause. So, Rebecca and Maddie are two cousins who are taking reproductive health to a whole new level. So, their goal is to create an informative and supportive and fun approach to cycle awareness and break down stigmas about menstrual cycles one word at a time. Maddie and Rebecca's goal is to help their clients learn as much as they can about their menstrual cycle so that they can become experts over their own body. One thing I really liked about Cousins with a Cause is they use simple and easy methods because when we are talking about menstrual cycles or anything like that, it doesn't always seem simple. So the cousins coach awareness, understanding, and acceptance to their clients to meet their reproductive or fertility needs. So I am super excited to have them on Everyday Infertility, and we're going to cover all things from their background and what are some of the key things that they teach us, as well as how they're supporting individuals today and how you can connect with them. So, Rebecca and Maddie, I am super excited to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Savannah. We're excited too.
Yes. So Rebecca and Maddie and I actually connected over Instagram, which I think is just a really great tool and how I have connected with most of my listeners and followers. And when they had first reached out and said, like, hey, here's what we do, I was like, that's really interesting. And talking about your menstrual cycle is not exactly like the most, you know, open thing. I think about like talking about my period and it's like with my best friends and like sometimes my husband and that's it. But after talking, you all explained it in such a fun way. I actually got off the call and I was like, that was so fun. So I'm really excited to dive in deep today. But I think a good place to start would be how you two kind of got on the subject of reproductive health and menstrual cycles and all of those things.
Yeah. You want to
Yeah,
start?
we do kind of love that question. So, Maddie and I are cousins, and we're actually quite a few years apart. So we're in kind of like different stages of our lives. But one
Mhm.
thing we really connected on, oddly enough, and just felt comfortable talking about was our menstrual cycles. So
Mhm.
both Maddie and I pay attention to our cycles and kind of follow natural charting. And so I found it really normal to talk to her about, oh, this is what phase I'm in, or this is what phase. And then she did too. And the more we talked about it, we realized that actually that's not our experience with other people in our lives. And we thought, oh, that's
Yeah.
weird. This is such a normal thing to talk
Mhm.
about. And the more we kind of got talking about it, was around the time in my life where I also still wanted to do more than just my job. And so I contacted Maddie one day. I'm like, I think we can do something more. And she's like, okay, I'm in. Let's do it. And so that's how we
That's
landed here.
that's so exciting. And from previous conversations with you all, there's such a passion there. And
Mm.
so I, in my mind, am thinking like you all are cousins. I don't know how often you get together, but you're obviously talking about this. I just picture this like you're at a Thanksgiving table and you're like, so cycle day 1, 10, 20. Like, I mean, how did you all kind of breach the topic of this?
Yeah, I think, well, it's kind of a twofold. One is we're both pretty into natural things anyways. We like to eat clean,
Yeah.
like to work out,
Mhm.
like to keep our bodies like wholesome and healthy. So that
Mhm.
kind of was, I think, a stair stepper into this conversation. But the other
Yeah.
thing is too is just acknowledging that it wasn't something to be shy about or to be weird about. And like Rebecca said, I'm about how many years younger? 8,
11.
11. Yeah, I'm really good
Who's
at math.
counting?
11 years younger. And when we kind of started becoming really close, I was at the stage in my life where I was sophomore, junior year in college. And I was really passionate about this and I really cared about it and cared about women knowing more than just what their doctor tells them or just the band-aid of approach of just here's a birth control pill. Like I really
Yeah.
cared about, well, what are you taking? Why are you taking it? Is it helping the reasons you thought you were supposed to be taking it? And so I just kind of started talking about that. And Rebecca is a clean freak as well, and in her like habits and methods and way of living. So it was an easy connection to realize there's a missing gap here of a very
Mhm.
healthy, normal lifestyle that society's just not talking about.
I
And so
love
it's
that.
kind of well, let's fill the gap and let's just be like normal people who aren't shoving this in your face, but also we want you to know your body. We want you to know how cool it is. Like it's one of the most beautiful things that we can do, and it's the most
Mhm.
natural thing that your body does. So just learning to embrace it and then making it more of a normal topic to have on the streets with your friends.
Yeah. I think, in the past couple years, I mean, I think back to when this became a topic for me. I started my period very young. I think I was in 4th grade, and that to me was really young. No, none of my other friends had started their period, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is a horrible thing that happened to me. I don't want to talk about it. And
Mhm.
really, that carried on into a lot of my adult life. I feel like with some of my best friends now, like, we are talking about some of those things, but I think it's the phase of life. Like, people
Mhm.
are trying to get pregnant, people are going off birth control, all of these things, and that's sparking it. But also on the flip side of that, if you get on TikTok or Instagram, or like you see more commercials now, it is starting to get talked about more and more. And one of the common themes I see is kind of what you said, Maddie, on that missing gap and wanting to be healthier. And is there a better way for that? What was there some point in your life when you all had that voila moment of like, oh, there is a different way to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can have slightly different stories where that question goes. So I'm the probably more typical story where went to high school and I couldn't wait to go to college because that meant I could go on the pill, and like super blindly I went in and was like, I'd like this, right? I had no idea. I didn't even ask what ingredients. I actually didn't really totally know how it worked. I'm going to be honest with
Yeah.
you. And I just stayed on it for a really, really long time and didn't really think much about it. And then
Hmm.
as my life and relationships and marriage progressed, that's where things changed. But there was a period of 10 years where I just took a pill and didn't even consider what it was doing to my
Mhm.
body. And one time, somebody in my life had mentioned this study they saw about the rise of estrogen levels in water. And okay, so I'm totally citing the story. I don't even know if it's super
Wow.
credible. But the
Hmm.
point was that because of the pill? Okay, so again,
Mhm.
I don't know its study, but all I'm saying is that comment was like, oh my gosh, what? Like, I never even thought
Yeah.
about it up to that point, right?
Hmm.
And then at the same time, I was starting to explore like more vegan type eating and just for other reasons, like because I'm a big runner and I like doing that stuff. And that's where it really got to me like, wow, the more you look into things that you did just because that's what you thought you did without really knowing it, there's actually a lot going on there.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying yes or no to the pill or hormonal contraceptives. I'm saying, wow, I really wish I would have had somebody to tell me, like, here's what's happening. Here's what's
Yeah.
actually going. And maybe they were, and maybe I wasn't ready. And so I get that too. But I
Hmm.
also didn't have this back
Mhm.
then either. I didn't
Yeah.
have a supportive type person to talk to.
So,
Mhm.
Rebecca, when you went, like you said, you went to college and you're like, okay, I'm getting on the pill. I know for me, I just went into my OB and I'm like, I want to get on birth control. And there was no like, are you sure? Here's what you can think
Mhm.
of. Here's your options. It was like, what pharmacy? And on to the next. Was that a similar experience for you?
I mean, it was a long time ago, but as far as I can remember, yes. And I think the other
Hmm.
thing that was hugely missing, and I have to take responsibility because it was obviously on me, but the idea of even recognizing your cycle and what was ovulation, what was luteal, like I didn't no idea.
Oh my
Seriously,
gosh.
Mhm.
not even for
Yes.
a number of years. I didn't
Hmm.
get that. I don't think I wanted to get that maybe, but that part was really missing too. So not only was I taking something I didn't really know what it was doing, I really didn't know
Yes.
how the cycle was working.
Mhm.
So yeah, and again, I have to own some of that. I can't just put that all in the medical field.
Oh, for sure.
I think when all those factors come together, right, like the secrecy, as you were mentioning, from having your period at a young age to just wanting the freedom of the pill or whatever, I mean, it just
Hmm.
makes this really secret kind of underground
Mhm.
process where we don't talk
Yeah.
about happening. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's
Interesting.
my experience with that. Hmm.
Yeah.
Maddie, what about you? What was your kind of light bulb moment?
I don't have like a light bulb moment like Rebecca
Hmm.
necessarily does, but I was raised in a very open household with my mom. My father passed away when I was young, so my mom and I were, and still are, just best friends. And I grew up in a household where she wasn't shy of talking about things. She kind of told me what to expect when my period was coming. She told me basically family planning from a very young age. And I actually became really passionate about the women body and family planning and just, I don't know, all around like the culture of life at a really young age. So I've always been excited about it. And I knew way before birth control was even a thought in my mind that I didn't want to go on it. But I will
Mm.
truthfully say that in college, I was the only person I knew not on it. So it kind of created a disconnect because I was super passionate about this since as long as I can remember, of just embracing your natural body, knowing what it's doing, knowing that if something's off in your cycle, it actually is a huge red flag to something
Mhm.
off in your body and something off in your health. And I don't know, it always just fascinated me and like encouraged me to tell other people. And I did face a lot of pushback in the college ages of, well, why would we believe you? Or why you don't know anything when my doctor just gave me this. And I would often just tell people at the end of the day, if you want to take it, take it. I'm just
Yeah.
encouraging you, read the small print.
Mhm.
Just read that
Just be
small print,
educated.
educate yourself, know how you feel when you take it, know what's happening when you take it. And then at that point, I'm not going to force you or not force you. But it always kind of broke my heart that so many women were facing increased mental health problems, increased weight gain, just a
Mhm.
lot of band aid solutions to a pill that they
Yeah.
didn't know what they were taking. And they were just told, here's this. And I can truthfully say I'm 20, I'm about to turn 27. I go to the doctor once a year. They offer it me every single year, and they actually push it every single year.
Wow.
Even though I've very openly said that I'm not looking to take it. So it's just again that gap in the
Yeah.
system of we need to just educate women and make sure it is normal, so that they can, either have a story like mine where they knew they didn't want to get on it, or at least if you do get on it, you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I haven't been in a situation where it's been pushed, but like I said, when I went off to college and became sexually active, I was like, I should probably get on the pill.
Mhm.
And that was just natural. Everyone was doing it. I vaguely remember a conversation with like my parents, and it's not that detailed of a conversation. They were just like, if you're having sex, you need to be on birth control. And I was like, yes, okay, I'll do that. But there was no education from my parents or from, anyone in the medical field, or me and my friends didn't know about it, nor did we care about it. We were in college. There was a million other things going on. And it truly wasn't even until I got married and I was like, you know what? Like Rebecca, I've been on this for years. And, I shared this story with you all last time we talked, but
Mhm.
I actually, there for a while, I had gotten like a ovarian cyst.
Mhm.
And my OB was like, well, just take your birth control and skip the sugar pills and just continue taking it. Because if you don't menstruate, then you are less likely to have an ovarian cyst. And I was like, oh, awesome. No ovarian cyst, no period. Like,
Mhm.
this is going to be amazing. And I did that for, I think, like a year because you don't have a period for 1 month. You're like, well, that was kind of awesome. And next month, maybe I have this pool party. So, like, I should do the same thing. And then the next month I'm traveling. Oh, my period's going to be that. So I'll just, what's one more month? And a year later was actually the time frame that I was getting engaged and married. And I'm like, well, I don't want a period now. And it wasn't until we got back from our honeymoon, I was like, you know what? I feel like I should get off this and kind of like cleanse my body. Not
Mhm.
that I'm trying to get pregnant at this moment, but like I've taken this for so long. How long is it going to take to get out of my system? And it was almost an entire year that I
Yeah.
did not have a normal period. And we're talking like 70 days between. And then you'd have like 50 days, 40 days. But it took forever to get to the normal, like, 20 some odd to 30 some odd days. And that's just something that I look back on now experiencing infertility issues. And I'm like, well, could it have been that?
Mm-hmm.
There's a possibility. I mean, there's nothing pointing to that. You're never going to find that out. But the fact that it's like, wow, I just did that because I didn't know anything else. That's a sad, sad reality.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we hear stories like that a lot too, where women come with a symptom, right? So a cyst or bad period pain or heavy
Mm-hmm.
bleeding, acne or anything, right? And
Yep.
we know that it's pretty commonly prescribed for a lot of different of those reasons. And then
Mm-hmm.
our question to that is, okay, so you fixed the symptom, like you covered it, right? But what caused the symptom? Right. And
What's
I
the
think
root cause?
yeah. And I think it's that kind of questioning and in general, not just with birth control. Oftentimes I think our culture will, look at kind of big pharmacy. It's geared towards, well, let's just fix the symptom here. Let's try this. Let's fix it.
Yep.
And so part of our whole approach is, well, let's get to know you and see what's happening. What could be
Mm-hmm.
causing some of this? Because like you said, and we may never know what does what, but if you could start trying to figure some of that stuff out and stop doing the Band-Aid thing, like what answers could you gain from there that could potentially be really helpful? And that's what
For
we're
sure.
trying to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what you all have set out to do, I think, is a really great mission. And you all help in kind of all areas under reproductive and like menstrual health and awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I kind of want to start with like the fertility piece and then we can kind of go from there. But, like, on the topic of fertility or even infertility, I mean, that spans very long and wide. What are some of the common conversations you all are having with women around menstrual infertility and reproductive awareness on that specific topic?
Mm-hmm. Well, so we kind of have a twofold with Cousins of the Cause. Like our
Mhm.
social media is more just general education based. Like we
Mhm.
just want content in front of women, and even couples so that the men can be involved too, so that they can learn. But then we also do coaching. And that's where that span really comes in with the fertility awareness. And it's kind of a beautiful thing because we've had clients who struggle with PCOS and are trying to get pregnant.
Mm.
And then we have clients who decided to get off the pill, and just don't want to get pregnant. And they're trying to avoid that at this time. And we've had
Yeah.
people trying to plan for families in the future and people trying to plan for families now. So it's kind of been like a big span of everything. And majority of it is just education, getting to know your body, getting to know the
Yeah.
signs and symptoms that your body puts out every single day.
Mhm.
But then also we do bring in, which I think is kind of fun too, other things too, like your diet, your exercise routine. How do your
Mhm.
boobs feel that day? Are you bloated? What did you eat the day before? Like, are
Yeah.
you stressed? Are you traveling? Just these things that are sometimes in your control, sometimes out of your control, but have so much of an impact on your everyday cycle, whether you know it or not.
I love that. So you mentioned a couple different things. So let's maybe start with like someone who's not trying.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously my podcast is geared to people who are more than likely trying.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is important because when when I hear someone who's not trying, I'm like, "Oh, okay, they're not trying to have a baby. But that doesn't mean they're still not expanding their family. They may be in between baby number one and baby number two, or baby number two and baby number three, or they may just be kind of in a holding pattern. So, Rebecca, you've actually talked a lot about like understanding your cycle. And I think that is so interesting because I had no idea what my cycle was until I started going through, or I guess still when I started trying to get pregnant. I did not, my period was fairly regular after like all the detoxing. And I would go into my calendar and I would open up the day I started my period and I would put a period, like literally just the dot on that day. And
Yeah.
every month, I would just kind of be like, "Oh, it's been a while," and I would scroll back and find that day and be like, "Okay, 28 days. Yeah, it's coming." Or I would just forget and be, like, out in public and be like, "I have to go to the bathroom." So, that is about what I knew about cycles pre trying to get pregnant. And then you throw into the mix like cycle day number this and ovulation and tracking and all of these things. And it's like if someone was just trying not to get pregnant and they wanted to track their cycle, what does that look like? And how would you educate someone on that topic?
Yeah, it's such a great point. So I think, again, what we're saying is nothing like we created, right? But it's just information
Yeah.
that people aren't aware of. So I always like starting with the number counting, right? So a lot of people don't realize that the first day of bleeding is actually day one. You think
Mm-hmm.
of that as the end of your cycle. So I love just starting with fun facts like that. And then some people don't realize that you can actually only get pregnant during certain times of the month too.
Mm-hmm.
And so we first break it down, and a lot of people don't realize there's actually 4 phases of the
Mhm.
menstrual cycle too.
Mm-hmm.
So again, all those
Yeah.
things, we just start with the really basic information. And then so if I were to take on a coaching client and somebody who is trying to not achieve pregnancy right now, I'd get a really detailed information about kind of their lifestyle and what the last couple months of their period has looked like. And I kind of look, have you been traveling here? How long was that cycle? Okay, did anything happen? Did you have COVID in between? Right. So we
Yeah.
just kind of look and we start to get an estimate. Okay. And then from the estimate, then we always start with cycle day one. And the goal is to teach the client to look for symptoms of each phase in the cycle. So
Okay.
I'll have clients and I'll say, okay, around this date, we're going to start to look for symptoms of ovulation. Here are some of the things you're going to look for, and we label them. And this is where the fun part comes in, because up to a couple years ago, I hated the word mucus because everybody else hated the word mucus.
Mhm.
Then I started
Yep.
talking to
Mm-hmm.
Maddie. She's like, "Oh, my mucus today," and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, yeah, it's not that bad of a word, right?" And so that would be me as well, where it was usually like over text that we talk to people, and sometimes calling. And we'll say, "Okay, so what color was the mucus? What did it look like today?" Or we'll help them how to even test that. What symptoms did you have? And so we are the non-medical best friend who also happens to know a lot
Mm-hmm.
about cycles. That's just going to create so much awareness via asking questions and helping them. So that's really all
Yep.
we're doing along the way. And then we find that, as we go along, we might look for things that could be impacting it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like one example would be, let's say you have a really, really high anxiety. Well, it's possible the pill was creating that high anxiety, and then the medication you were taking for the
Mm-hmm.
anxiety isn't actually helping anyways, or all these kind of factors. And I'll never give out
Mm-hmm.
medical advice, but we're here just to ask the questions and to help them also make informed decisions about themselves. So that's really what it would look like a coaching session is just
Yeah.
education. And then I'm going to be with you every step of the month, right? And I'm going to share your calendar with you to see what symptoms. And then we put together kind of a roadmap from there. And then at the end of it, they learned so much about their body. And that's kind of what we're shooting for.
And then they just do it from that point on.
Yeah.
They do it by themselves when like the
Mhm.
coaching ends, their session ends. And
Mhm.
once you know that much about your body, you just continue on.
Mhm.
And I think just to add to that a little bit, something that's really fun is if you start Googling fertility awareness or fertility methods,
Yeah.
you are going to get a laundry list of different methods, different ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And something that,
Temperature.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
temperature, mucus, like
Mhm.
actual hormonal tests. Like there's so
Mhm.
many
Mm-hmm.
ways. And something that I think is really fun that we do is whatever way you want to track your fertility, we'll work with you. So if you
Yeah.
want to use the temperature, we'll do that too. And we'll
Mhm.
just make sure you're doing it the proper way, looking for the proper signs, etc. If you want to just do mucus tests, like looking for mucus and bodily signs, we'll do that too. So like it's kind of fun for us even to see like, oh, there's a new method that this person
Yeah.
really wants to try, and then we get to learn more as we go too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So the tracking piece, understanding your cycle is super important, whether you're trying to get pregnant or trying to avoid it. You mentioned kind of the 4 phases, and this is new to me. I feel like kind of the rage in like fitness now is like you line up your workouts with like your
Yeah.
phases. So like phase 1, like
Yeah.
this may be low impact, and then this, and
Yeah.
it actually hit me because I saw it on a TikTok. I think it was like this past weekend. And I was like, ooh, I need to line up like my phases with my
Uh-huh.
workout. And then I was like, wait, I'm talking with Maddie and Rebecca this weekend. I need to ask them because I'm realizing as I'm like trying to line up my workouts, like I don't even know what these phases mean. So like
Uh-huh.
can you walk through the 4 phases and like around what days they are and like what are common symptoms and like what happens in those?
Yeah. So I actually made a fun reel about this where I made like a
Oh.
little acronym to help remember, or kind of like put memory tricks to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to start with my favorite myth about this. Or I'm sorry, it's not a myth. It's actually like true. I think it's true. Is that you can have increased athletic performance on day 1 of your period. So the day that most people like want to stay on the couch and not do anything, if you did
Yes.
push through and work out, you can achieve increased athletic performance. So there's my little, yeah.
Interesting.
And
Like, is there any science behind that? Is it
yes,
like
there
just
is.
your
I could
I know.
jump into it. It's when you're
Yeah.
so when you menstruate. Okay,
Mhm.
actually, I'm just gonna start from the beginning. So menstruation is phase 1,
Uh-huh.
and your estrogen and progesterone. So what happens is your progesterone is your pregnancy hormone. So
Uh-huh.
it will skyrocket as you get closer to ovulation to find out if you're pregnant, and then come back down. But when these are crossing over and they're at a neutral position, you're gonna have increased. Well, when your estrogen's on the rise and progesterone's coming down, you're gonna have an increase in athletic performance in HIIT workouts and high intensity things like that. So at that point in the
Mhm.
state in your phase, your body knows you're not pregnant because you have your period. So your progesterone is going down, your estrogen is starting to skyrocket back up. So it's kind of a
Interesting.
fun and like
Mhm.
you know the common themes of well, I'm just going to sit around and eat ice cream, but you actually have not only increased
Mhm.
athletic performance as your estrogen. So your body knows you're not pregnant, progesterone's going
Yeah.
down. As your estrogen's going up, you also have increased creativity.
Mhm.
Um, you're more sociable, so that's like the time to plan gatherings, go out with friends,
Huh.
go to happy hour. You're probably more attentive at work. You have just more better energy, better attitude as your estrogen's on the rise. So that's kind of your period, which is menstruation phase 1, and phase 2, which is the follicular phase. As you're building up that estrogen again, you're basically resetting your uterus for potential pregnancy again.
Hmm.
So that's how we're doing with
Okay.
ovulation.
Mhm. Yeah, and then so ovulation is kind of fun, and I think this is the phase that gets the most attention because this is when you're either going
Mhm.
to achieve or avoid, because we know that there's a peak day of that, and there's also a chance that sperm could live before
Mm.
that too. So this is a really particular phase, right? You don't want to mess this up too much, depending on what you're trying to do. But this is also, I think, where you get some of the most symptoms if you're really keen into it. And that's why I love trying to help work with clients of like what there are, what symptoms they have.
Mhm.
Some might have like breast tenderness, but some might have insomnia, or some might just feel like their stomach looks differently. So it's hard
Hmm.
to explain. It's totally individual. So that's ovulation. And again, that's kind of that middle period that gets a lot of attention.
Mm.
But I think the hard part about ovulation is that you you okay, depending on what method you use, right? You might not totally be able to predict what peak day was until you have the period again, right? Until your menstruation. So you can so
Gotcha.
like as people are learning, they might not totally be able to pinpoint it until they get more regular with their cycle. So that's just the one
Mhm.
trick if you're only
Mm.
using just kind of a charting method.
Yeah, it
But
was.
otherwise, it can be pretty you can
Yeah,
get pretty good at it.
it'll take
Mhm.
about 3 months to
Mhm.
kind of really, or 3 full cycles to really figure out, like, okay, this was this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
ovulation's kind of fun on the workout theme of,
Mhm.
so now your estrogen's been growing, but ovulation's where you can get pregnant.
Mhm.
So your progesterone is also on the rise at this point. Until progesterone is higher than estrogen, you're going to have really good high intensity workouts, long runs. Again, so being very sociable. But after ovulation, so after you drop your egg, and whether it gets fertilized or not, is when it switches back over. And now progesterone's the highest, waiting to see if you're pregnant. And that's the great time for low intensity, sitting on the couch reading a book, going on a walk, doing yoga, like kind of,
Resetting.
yeah, resetting, filling
Mhm.
that time back up until you hit menstruation again.
So I've just been doing it backwards this whole time.
Yeah.
So on the ovulation front, I mean, you talked about mucus, you talked about the basal body temperature, there's strips. I mean, I feel like every year, every couple years, there's like a new thing. Um, how or what would you suggest if someone is tracking ovulation? What's kind of your favorite way to track it? And
Mhm.
then, like, let me maybe caveat that. What do you think is the most accurate?
Yeah.
That's kind of a hard question,
Yeah.
but
So both of us love mucus. I would say
yeah.
that's our number one sign. And it's,
So neither of us use external. We don't take temperature. We don't use basal. We don't use any strips or anything. We just use bodily signs.
And so I think, like I said, I think it's whatever the client is comfortable with or wants to try. But with every with every symptom, with every way you track it, it's going to eventually start to work out based on your cycle, right? So that's what I'm saying. That you can't just look at the 1 week. You have to look at, okay, what did this look like 2 weeks later or 3 weeks? Are we starting to build a pattern? So, yeah, I guess to answer that question, Shirley, we love mucus. It's our favorite.
Yeah. And
So, go ahead, Maddie.
I was just gonna say, like the fun takeaway of tracking too is if you're trying to avoid, as soon as mucus becomes present and you start noticing that, like that's your signal to not have sex. Or to find other ways of intimacy, go on date night, have massages, whatever. But if you're trying to avoid, the mucus is like your red flag to say like, stop if you don't want to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But then for, like you said, your listeners, that's like the big flag for, okay, this is our go time. Like this is the time that we are able and willing to get pregnant. But it's so cool once people realize, and I can't even count on my hands how often people have no clue that they can only get pregnant during ovulation. And they're so scared of not being on the pill or even having sex because it's just this lingering societal theme that well, I'll get pregnant if I'm not on the pill.
Oh yeah.
But it's really just one phase of the 4.
Yeah, I mean, I joke, I have a very morbid, well, I guess not morbid, but I mean, a very dark sense of humor in this joke. But I tell my friends all the time, I'm like, I spent a lot of my younger years trying not to get pregnant because I was like, oh, I did it. I have a chance. And now, both of my tubes are blocked. And I just kind of laugh. I'm like, oh, that was a waste of time. Joking. But, I had no idea. Even and I try and think back, it just wasn't a topic I thought of. But until me and my husband were like, "Okay, let's try." I didn't know. I just kind of thought you just had sex all the time and like it was just maybe that like one time it was super special, it worked. And I remember this story. It was like a friend of a friend or like a family friend. I can't even remember it so long ago, but this is the one thing ingrained in my mind. Someone was telling me like, "Oh, we know the day we got pregnant." And it was like this elaborate, we were like date night, got a hotel, like super special night. And I'm like, "Oh, so it has to be like really good for you." I'm like, I had no idea. That is and it's so crazy that I think I was a married woman. Like, I think it was at 25, we said, "Okay, let's try."
Yeah.
And I didn't know that after 25 years of being a woman. Like, you don't think that came up?
Yeah.
Well,
Wild.
I mean, to validate you, yes, we see that all the time. I mean, but that's the missing piece, right? Is
Yeah.
why don't we know that? Or why didn't we know that? And
Yeah.
who knows how much that could have helped. And you have to learn that somewhere and somehow, right? Which is exactly what
Yeah.
we're trying to do.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I always say too, like I always want to add in to any educational thing we do, the like trigger warning of when you are watching reels or looking at TikTok and they're starting to teach you this fertility awareness of being very careful. Because I actually have friends who have done this of like, well, on my app, it says I'm going to ovulate on this day.
Oh, yeah.
And just following the app is becoming kind of trendy right now. And we're over here like, okay, be really careful.
But what does your mucus say?
Yeah, like don't just follow the app. Don't trust Apple's algorithm. It's pretty good if you have what they call quote unquote normal cycle, which is about 28 days.
Yeah.
It's pretty close, but like be really careful because things can throw it off so quickly.
Yeah.
And people are so like tied to like, well, no, I ovulate this day. And I'm like, okay, but you do have to watch your body every day because your app is not always going to be 100% accurate.
Oh, no, for sure. I think, I have done everything under the sun. I've done the strips. I've done the basal body temperature. I've done the mucus, which that is the next thing I want to talk to you guys about because I feel as if in the fertility world, it was kind of a buzzword to me. And I remember I was seeing an acupuncturist and she was like, well, do like, mucus. I forget what she called it, but she was like, you need to check your mucus. And I'm like, I need to do what? And she's like, yep. She's like, at about day this, insert your fingers and like pull it out and it should be this consistency. And not that she wasn't clear. I just was like, okay. And I just never could remember because there was like the egg white sticky and like the one that stretches and I would be like, well, which one's which? And the weird thing is when I would Google, I would get kind of differing answers. And it
Yeah.
kind of hit me like, well, is everyone's mucus the same? Like I feel like mine's different. So can you guys just touch on for people listening, like, is there a easy way to understand it?
Yes and no.
Yeah. I mean,
It
I think the
depends.
easiest is really starting to learn your own body, right? Because here's
Mhm.
one thing that comes up too is working out. That can create
Mhm.
some sensations, or being aroused, that creates sensation. But the more sample size you have, so the more you test out and the more months in a row you do this, you are going to become your own expert on what is
Gotcha.
what. So what's my 5 days leading up and what does peak look like?
Mhm.
And,
Okay.
if after 6 months of this, you're going to be pretty darn sure that
peak.
that's peak and that was the leading up. And that random one was that workout and that other one was arousal. But you
Okay.
have to do that for your own body. And so that's why you have to keep checking, keep looking at it and talking about it, because that's the only way you're going to tell for your own body.
And we'll ask too. So like,
Mhm.
if you were to say like, oh, it was slimy, I'm like, okay, but what does slimy mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
define slimy, because
Mhm.
typically like at the beginning when you're just getting fertile or when mucus is starting to present itself, it's not going to be the super slippery texture. That's closer to the end, which is peak. But if
Okay.
you don't know that and you're just like, oh, that looks kind of slippery to me, we'll just ask you like, okay, so you're starting to see mucus and you're calling it slippery. What does that mean? Is it exactly what you
Mhm.
said? Looks sticky? Is it goopy? Is it clear? Is it white? Is it green? Because if it's green, you might have an infection. Like,
Mhm.
there's a lot going on there. So
Mhm.
if you want to call that slippery, I'm just going to ask you to define it.
Yep.
So, and
Gotcha.
then moving forward, like what you might call slippery, I might call goopy, but it's the
Mhm.
same type of mucus. It's just how you're seeing it
Mhm.
and kind of like your trigger words for it. And then again, what Rebecca said is like, okay, that I had that mucus for that day, and that day. And then all of a sudden it was not slippery anymore, whatever you call it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
now it's goopy. And that change is when you're going to switch from just your fertile phase to actual peak ovulation, the egg drop
Gotcha.
there.
And I think that's important that you guys ask because, like I said, I'm seeing this acupuncturist, and at this time she's explaining it to me, and she's using her words. And
Yeah.
that's maybe why when I was doing it, I'm like, this does not seem like egg whites. But then
Mhm.
again, I'm like, I don't really, I was just like so lost.
Yeah.
And what I really wanted to be is like, can I just take a picture and send it to you? Like, can you help me? Because I don't know the word she's using, and maybe I'm using different words. And so it's just so confusing. It's like if I were to hold up, like this paper, I'm like, well, is this orange? And
Mhm.
you may be like, oh, well, no, that's neon orange. But, Rebecca may be like, oh, well, that's kind of like a darker orange. Like we're all seeing different things and explaining them differently. And it doesn't sound like there's an easy or universal way. And so it takes time, from what I'm hearing, and patterns, which is important.
Mhm.
And, Maddie, you said, quote unquote, a normal cycle. Like, that's not, I don't know
Normal.
anyone that has a normal cycle at all. I mean, all of my friends were all on different days. I think one of my girlfriends the other day was like, oh, yeah, I'm like 24 days. And I was like, 24? That happens that often? Oh my gosh. But like, that's her normal. And
Mhm.
it's just not normal to me.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that, so going back to the picture thing, I think that's so funny you say that. I mean, that's what we're trying to provide, is that person you can text and be like, okay, wait, let's talk this
Mhm.
over. And
Yeah.
again, you have to make a medical appointment to talk to your coach, and you can just say, all right, I'm noticing
Yeah.
this today. What do we think it is? And that's
Mhm.
what we wanted, is just almost like that friend approach of, all right, let's just shoot a text and like see where we're at here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because I think you can feel really overwhelmed with material and really confused by it, and then
Yep.
just whatever, throw my hands up, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we don't want
No,
people to.
absolutely. So we talked through menstrual and ovulation, and then I know there's two more. What are those?
Yeah. So it's follicular. So it's menstruation, follicular. I can say it. Ovulation, and then luteal.
So do you want
Okay.
to know how I remember them?
Yes. Do your
Right.
Yes, I
little.
do.
So menstruation is, man, I have my period again. And follicular is, finally, it's over. And
Mm,
ovulation is, options here. And then luteal is, let's wait and see. So that's
okay,
how,
I like that.
there
I
you go.
like that. Awesome.
But my
So it
personal favorite is follicular. I don't know. I don't know why I love that phase
No,
because I'm
yeah.
always like, ooh, what business should we start? Or like,
Yeah.
what job should we take over? Like, that is
You're
truly
like, "My cramps have stopped and I'm back to a normal human. Let's do
yes.
this."
Yeah, exactly. Your periods just ended. You like feel refreshed, you're renewed. And I've heard this a lot, or I've read it a lot too. We don't normally equate it to that, but people will do it like the seasons. So
Mm,
your period is winter, follicular, where you're regrowing your uterus, basically you're
mhm,
repreparing it, is spring.
mm,
Summer is ovulation, when you can or cannot get pregnant, and then fall is you're kind of resetting for winter, resetting for your
okay.
period. So I have heard that like a little bit too as a analogy. But I do really enjoy the phase of like your body's reset. You're either just found out you didn't get pregnant or you did, and now you kind of get to just regrow your estrogen, and I know it's a very like high energy time, which is more up my alley than the luteal phase, where you're kind of like, I don't know. I always think I want to eat like soup and just sit by a fireplace when I'm in my luteal
Just,
phase.
just comfy.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's so funny that you guys are explaining this because yesterday I was in such a just bad mood and I was like, I just want to be alone and read a book and like sit in the bath. And I even checked my app. I'm like, when am I starting my period? And I
Hmm.
think it was like cycle day 25. And I'm like, why am I in such this funk? Like, shouldn't that be days 1 through 5? And so now that you all are explaining it, I'm like, well, this makes so much sense. Like, I'm actually outside of day 1, which my cramps are just as I get older, they get worse. My period's not that bad. So, you
Hmm.
saying like working out, you're at kind of peak performance and like you're actually in a good mood and social, like now that I'm kind of looking back, yeah, it seems kind of spot on, except for really the cramps outside of that.
Hmm.
Um, one thing I do want to talk about is on the topic of periods. Like, there are so many symptoms that people experience. And you all have mentioned a couple times, like learning your body and the symptoms and all of that. But one thing you mentioned was like, if there is an imbalance, that should be a red flag. What
Hmm.
are some symptoms during your period that are red flags? Like, are cramps normal? Are they a red flag?
So I could probably go a bunch of different ways, but I'm actually gonna take my favorite way, which is like the overall picture of environment and nutrition. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's being looked at is the role of nutrient density in
Mhm.
a person's life, and then how that relates to their menstrual cycle and what's needed to help promote the menstrual cycle. So there's been a lot of research about certain foods helping the menstrual cycle along the way. And so when I coach clients, or even for myself, I often just step back and think, okay, if there's red flags. So for me, if I actually have really easy periods, but I also am a whole foods plant-based eater. I don't drink a lot. I exercise. I mean, don't really have fun, but I can tell on the days that I maybe have more processed foods or more alcohol, I have
Mm,
harder menstrual cycles or a harder period that week. So
interesting.
I would say a red flag would be kind of anything that's really uncomfortable, but then are you also willing to look at the whole picture, environmental, stress, illness, what you're putting
Sleep.
into your body, sleep? Because again, I think that we can't overlook those things as how they play in with our life. And then like the
Mhm.
cheesiest thing I say, but I'm going to say it anyways, is the menstrual cycle is a very natural process, just like the seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're not giving our body like natural things, it makes sense to me that they would go out of sync, right? So if I'm only giving it packaged
Mm-hmm.
food with nutrient, like low nutrient density, things might not work as well as I'd want them to. So
Which
that's my
goes for
long
so many
answer.
things.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
how
in
does that?
general, I would just like add to in
Mm-hmm.
general,
Mm-hmm.
your period should never put you into a place where you can't go to work, you can't go to school because your
Yeah.
cramps are so bad you're getting sick. Like I've heard of a lot of girls getting on the pill because they're like, well, I am in so much pain to the point of puking. I'm like, okay, but
Yes.
again, as Rebecca said, your period should never, you should never write that off as like, oh, it's just menstruation. Like
Yeah.
it's just what happens to women because it's actually not. Like that is a big flag. And that's okay. Let's take a look at the broader picture
Mm-hmm.
of everything Rebecca just mentioned, but also like, how's your family life? How are you
Yeah.
sleeping? What's your stress level right now? Like
Mm-hmm.
your body is the cycle is actually it's oftentimes called the fifth vital sign or the sixth vital sign
Mm-hmm.
of if these things are happening, it's your body just telling you something else is off. So if
And
you
that's
are having,
so,
yeah,
that brings up something because I had actually, I'm going to say I had like the simplest period in the world until probably the last couple years. And I say like I have cramps. Like they're very normal cramps. You take some
mhm,
Midol and a couple hours later you're fine. But I, like you mentioned, had friends growing up that they would miss days of school because
mhm,
their periods were so bad. And now later in life, some of them that I've kept in touch with, like they did find out they had PCOS or
mhm.
endometriosis or other things. And so in some of them, I don't know, I never stayed in touch with them, but I have friends that have bad periods and it's just something they've always dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest someone do if they're like, well, maybe I eat fairly healthy, maybe I have a low stress level, maybe I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, but I still just have these really bad periods. What can they do or what should they be looking for?
Yeah, there comes a point in time too where like we are only a coach and like Rebecca mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
we're not a medical team and you might actually just have a hormonal imbalance that's
Mm,
beyond food, sleep, it could need medical
yeah.
intervention at that point.
Yeah.
And so we always recommend like there's a point where we can coach and help as much as possible, but if you have a true like deficiency, that does need to be
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed medically.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a big thing, but do you want to add anything?
Well, and the cool part about that though is how cool if you like ruled out all these other things and then by
Mm-hmm.
the time you sought medical intervention, you had to, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I tried this, or I tried
Mm-hmm.
this, or I weeded this out. So I think that it's all about taking the minimal steps necessary or the least invasive steps necessary. And then if you ended up needing more medical care, then at least you have
Mm-hmm.
all these other steps like, yep, I've done this, or I've done this
Mm-hmm.
before you get further intervention, which is always a possibility.
Yeah.
And it could be
Mhm.
simple. It could be low iron, low magnesium,
Right.
thyroid
Mm.
problem, or it could
Vitamin
be,
D,
yeah,
I call
vitamin
it.
D,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be you don't produce enough estrogen, and that's a whole different
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And that's something we can't often tell from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
Mhm.
And that's interesting that you link it back to hormones because I think hormones are becoming, at least in kind of my circle of like individuals I'm around, I think they're becoming more, people are becoming more aware of them.
Yeah.
I was talking with a girlfriend this past weekend and I can't even remember. I think we're on the topic of weight or something. And I was like, I go to this naturopath doctor, and every year she runs a full panel. I'm talking like 8 or 9 vials of blood, but it's everything. And
Wow.
she is like, your vitamin D is low. Your this is low. Your this is low. Your this is low. You specifically need to take these vitamins, but everything else looks great. Actually, this is a little too high, blah, blah, blah. And I've been seeing her for I think 3 or 4 years now. And you mentioned a few things like my vitamin D, extremely low.
Mhm.
Now, I think last time I went, she was like, you can actually cut back. I iron, I was low. I didn't know. Iodine, I have thyroid issues. And so I'm actually on an iodine supplement right now, eating a ton of kale, and supplementing with kelp and all of these things, but I feel the best I've ever felt. And I know that's not directly related to the period, but like your hormones play so many different roles. And so it's like the diet that you talk about. And, I think supplements are a big part. If you're, deficient in something and you don't know, it could be affecting all of these other things, your hormones being one of them. What is your period linked to? Hormones. And so it's like, I feel so often the human body is a domino, and it's like one tiny thing can be off and it's going to affect something way over here. Or, one thing's off and it may not be a big issue, but then you add this other symptom into the mix or this medicine or whatever, and now you have this perfect storm. It's just so aggravating because it's like, why can't my body just work perfectly? But I think it's important that we have these conversations because someone may be listening and being like, you know what? I've dealt with this symptom for so long. Why don't I just figure out the root cause?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really what we want to empower people to do. And I think it can be overwhelming. Or right when you go on Google, there are a million things pop up and then it's just
Yeah.
too overwhelming. Okay, and then you quit anyways. Because I think you have to be careful where you get information. And I will say that we understand that lifestyle changes can be hard too. And it
Oh, yeah.
really depends. You have to be in a place in your life. Like think of us in our 20s, like talk about what the body can put up with, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then now that I'm older, I'm like, oh man, if I lose like 10 minutes of sleep, I feel it, right? So I think, yeah, people have to be ready to kind of look at that stuff. And, the body puts up with so much, right? Because the body can tolerate so much until it doesn't. And then, yeah, it's about people's willingness to say, does it bother me enough to want to make changes? Because a lot of what we talk about comes down to lifestyle changes.
Oh,
It's
for
just,
sure.
yeah.
And
That is
acknowledging
interesting.
too that oftentimes like we hear of women who all of these other side effects are happening or bad symptoms, and it does come back to the conversation of the birth control pill too, of that is a one size fits all hormonal pill. It doesn't
Yes.
say, okay, Savannah, you're low in this, this, and this, but you need this. Let's create a pill that conforms to your body. It's a one size fit all hormonal package. So when women do start taking it and start actually realizing a lot of those signs and symptoms come from, well, before I was producing this much estrogen and now I have this much artificial estrogen and it's making me feel really down, or it's making me feel really bad about myself, or it's
Yeah.
changed the things I'm attracted to. Because it's artificial hormones, it's not what your body's actually creating. And so it actually does change your likes and dislikes too, which is
Yeah.
a really fascinating approach too. So just going back to that hormone, like really being in tune with your body is also just being in tune with the natural process that it creates. And then when those red flags pop up, you can target them or think about them or choose to change them.
How would someone detox from birth control? Is that something you guys have worked through with individuals before?
Yeah, quite a few, right? So we had one client who could no longer sleep through the night. And
Wow.
yeah, and it was pretty much determined that the hormone imbalances. And one of the factors was 18 years on the pill or 15. It was a super long time on the pill, right? So I think the first thing you have to decide is within yourself, right? Get lots of information. I think talk to your partner if that is your situation. And then I think you got to you may want to get a plan of how you want to track or move forward with what your goals are. And then you can pretty much, depending on what pack you're using, what you're using, you can stop, safely at the end of the pack, or obviously in some cases you have to get it removed, right? And that's pretty much about making an appointment. So, and then the detox, I think you just have to be prepared for, usually you're going to bleed right away because that's what's happening. And then you might want to prepare yourself for some ups and down moods and some
and acne.
yeah, and some kind of craziness happening in your body. And I think it's a lot easier to accept if you just remind yourself, this is my body getting back to normal. So my body getting back to normal. And be super patient with yourself. And I think that would be an especially important time to really eat in nutrient dense ways and get a lot of exercise, right? Because those are the ways to get healthy hormones, right? Like keep our cortisol down and keep all that positive stuff up. So those would be some of the tips we'd suggest. And we do work with a fair amount of people who are just coming off of it. And just patience, a lot of patience.
Their stories are so individualized too. Like I've known girls who have gotten off of it and they just flew right back into a normal period, normal cycle, normal symptoms. And then I know girls, like you even mentioned too, where it's taken a full year to actually like feel like themselves, have a normal period again, or menstruate normally. And a lot of it is ups and downs mentally and just kind of figuring out like what your body needs and where it needs it.
Rebecca, you talk about nutrient dense food, and I never want to assume anything, but talk to me about like what are some of the best foods or maybe categories of foods
Best question
for
for you ever.
someone?
I love this so much. And the good news is it's really, really simple. Okay. So if you think about your food, ask yourself, was it made in a plant or from a plant?
Okay.
Right. So if it was like literally grown out of the ground like a potato or a fruit or veggie, we can be pretty sure that it's got everything we need, right, for the most part.
Yeah.
And then if it was processed in a plant, it's probably deficient of things we need, or it has extra things we don't need, like preservatives, possibly. And trust me, like I eat plenty of that stuff too. But at every meal, instead of saying what I can't eat, I'll say like, okay, what could I add to this? So how could I add some carrots to this sub that I'm getting? Or how could I add, some more veggies or fruits, right? So to make it really simple, that's what I say. Like, what came from the earth? Again, as cheesy as it sounds, but our cycles are just as natural as the things out there.
Yeah.
That would make sense. So that's kind of where fertility is.
And I think that makes so much sense. I mean, I've listened to so many podcasts and read so many things like whole foods. And what I mean by whole foods is like it literally comes from the earth is so great for you. I mean, yes, there's pesticides and there's, things have mutated over time, but at the end of the day, that's probably the best thing you can eat. Where do you, or I guess, is there any thoughts on like protein during, any of those phases? Because I feel like there are actually parts in my cycle that I'm like, wow, I just want a big old T-bone steak. I know my iron's probably low, but there are also other times in my cycle where I'm looking at like any type of meat and I'm like, I can't stomach that right now. Does that play into anything?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely think it does. Yeah. And I think the trick is to be mindful of it and maybe not let it totally rule you. And what I mean by that is, that myth of like, I get chocolate when I'm on my period. Right.
Which I do because I want to.
And like there's
Who doesn't?
I get that, and I think when we try to just really be in tune with your body, so obviously your body was telling you something. So I'd say start trusting it, for the most part. Don't, if it's just a myth or like a story you tell yourself, maybe work on that. But yeah, I love when people listen to their body and recognize like, okay, this is what I think it's craving. And then how do you feel after you eat it? Because that's also going to tell you, hey, did I do the right thing? And then you'll know for next time. And then on that note, we cannot say enough about water. Water.
Ooh.
I mean, mucus is part water too. So I think the hydration is going to be really key during all stages of menstruation.
So that's super important. And if you ask anyone in my life, I am the worst water drinker ever. And it's not that I'm drinking anything else. I'm really not like a pop person either. I'm just not thirsty. And I know that is an issue. I had to get one of like the Stanley cups and carry it with me everywhere. It's like my emotional support cup. But I have to do that because I would drink 8 to 10 ounces of water a day. And then I would have all these like issues. And my husband's like, well, you had 4 sips of water in 24 hours. Like, that's why. So, how does the hydration play into your cycle?
I mean, I think it just in our bodies in general. So, what are our bodies like 80, 90% water?
Something like that. Yeah.
Super high. So, it makes sense. And like the cells are comprised of it and mucus comes from it. So, I don't think you can go wrong with more water. There's really nothing. Yeah. And I like to think of it as like our body's own detox. It's like, oh, wow, it's like working through me and, like giving me so much hydration and then also helping you urinate, which is a detoxing thing too. So it's just such a cool substance. And I get that people have different thoughts about that. And if you're going to start one habit, start there. You can't with that.
And I think the other things too, like is your skin less dry? are you waking up without a headache if before you did wake
Mhm.
up with a headache? There's other symptoms too that not only will you have a better cycle, you'll also just sleep better,
Oh,
be
yeah.
less hungry throughout the day, have
Mhm.
not as dry skin.
After I was bullied by everyone in my life to drinking more water, my life has gotten better. That is like one thing that
Case
I
in
have my
point.
stamp of approval. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I don't get those headaches every day. That's crazy that I like went to an eye doctor because I truly was like, what's wrong with me? And people are
Mm.
like, drink more water. I'm like, that's
Mm.
not it. I think I
Yeah,
need to get
it
my
can't be
eyes
that
checked.
simple. I
I
mean,
know. I'm like, it truly can't be that simple. No. Awesome. Okay. Well, a couple last things. So, one thing is if someone is looking for coaching within their cycle,
Mm.
what would that process look like with you all?
Get ready to get comfortable with us.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, we
First
come
day.
in as like your best friends. Like, oh, tell us everything about your yeah. No, but in all honesty, that's part of breaking the stigma, which I know we haven't touched on much. Is that
Yes.
we don't want to keep it secret. We don't want to giggle about it. I mean, well, sometimes it's fun to laugh, but we just
Yeah.
want to say it because I think the more we normalize it, we're starting a trend and hopefully normalizing it for others. So
Yeah.
they come in and they get a consultation and we kind of just see where their goals, what their goals are and kind of where they're at and what they've tried. And then from there, we schedule the first kind of official session and we sometimes pair that with where they're at in their cycle. And then we just get to town and we usually agree on some sort of tracking method that they maybe share with
Mhm.
us or not, or we decide on a way of communicating. And then from there, it's just about constant communication, constant awareness, helping them be aware. Like I said, the questioning, and yeah, just helping them with their goals and not being shy to say things that might be embarrassing prior to that
Oh,
point.
for sure.
So,
And
yeah.
I love that you touched on the stigma piece. And I'm going to go back to our last conversation because Maddie, what you say has just stuck with me. So we were discussing and we talked about the stigma of just like menstrual awareness and menstrual health. And you had said, like, the thing that everyone was taught, you can probably say it better, but will you tell about the tampon in the sleeve?
Yeah. No, it's just the stigma that like something that's so natural and healthy and honestly beautiful, we're taught to like suppress, hide, and don't let anyone know.
Yeah.
So Rebecca actually came up with this of like, I remember in the 7th grade when I finally got my period of like, I would go to the bathroom and I would shove the tampon up my sleeve. And I am 27 almost, and I still do that because it's
Yes.
what
Yes.
society taught us is like it's a hush hush thing. No one can know you're on your period,
Mm-hmm.
even though you can't help it. It's literally natural. But it's such like a you don't want anyone to know. You want to hide
Mhm.
it. You wear a different swimsuit if it's that time of month.
You
Yeah.
open the wrapper really
Quietly,
quietly so
yeah.
nobody yeah, you know we're all talking.
Like the
Yes.
woman in their nose.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, in the women's bathroom where
yeah,
someone else is probably on their period.
yeah.
And yes, I mean, I was just at a work event a couple weeks ago and I did the same thing. And I even was like timing it. I'm like, okay, in between this breakout session, I could like go get my purse, shove it in my sleeve, walk to the bathroom, and no one will think it's weird like I went to my purse. Like, what? And I was truly like planning it out. And I'm like, half of these people in here are married or women. Why does it matter? But you're right. It is so
Mhm.
oftentimes, and I put it in my sleeve because I'm like, I don't want someone watching me go to the bathroom with my purse. And they already know I'm on my period because why else would I
Mhm.
bring my purse in the bathroom, which is such a normal thing? It's just so stigmatized, which I feel like there are a lot of things around, just females and women in general that are stigmatized. But like, this is something that I think most every woman on planet Earth shares. This
Yes.
is a shared experience. Why?
Yeah, and
Mhm.
it happens every month, or for some people, right? Or like
Mm.
it happens often. And let's
Yeah.
just be honest. And yet, it's still something every month or every 2 months or whenever you feel like you need to kind of hide or skirt around or something. And we're here to say that that's actually not necessary.
Mhm.
That's not needed, right? Like, do you say, "Shh, don't say my blood pressure out loud, please"? Like, that's not okay, right? No,
Yeah.
it really is a vital sign. It's a vital sign. Like, talk
Yeah.
about it. Hear about it.
Mhm.
Right? It's telling me something. So yeah, we
Yeah.
we love breaking the stigma.
Yes.
Well, and I don't even know. I mean, the stigma had to start somewhere, and I have no idea. I'm sure it's like back in the day, the whole like women are meant to stay home and have baby. I don't know, but it is very like I should feel as a 28, almost 29-year-old woman, I can either walk to the bathroom with my purse and not feel
Mhm.
judged. No one is probably judging me, or like not have to shove it up my sleeve because I'm going to make someone else feel uncomfortable. I just feel like that's a little asinine in this day and age.
Yeah. Well, and it's paralleled, if you really think about the whole thing, it's paralleled with the fact that we didn't actually learn about fertility awareness in the homes
Yeah.
or in the schools or in the churches. It's always been a hush hush topic. So that's just the
Mhm.
natural, that's your innate reaction
Yeah.
is hush hush quiet,
Mhm.
put the tampon up the sleeve. And we're
Mhm.
not out here advocating for you to like wave it around in the office and like send an email to everyone, but just not feeling ashamed
I'm
or
on my
embarrassed.
period.
Yeah, like here I am. But just knowing that like I think one of the big things we really want to get across is like it's actually cool. Natural and healthy is cool.
Yeah.
And it's great that your body is functioning the way it's supposed to, and you don't need to suppress that or hide that or be ashamed of that for any reason.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You just gave me my next idea. When I'm in a bad mood, I'm just going to put my out of office on and it's going to say, I'm on my period. Please
Uh-huh.
respect this time.
Please respect. My boyfriend, if I'm having like a really bad workout, he'd be like, "What phase are you in?" Like I'm like, "Hey, but at
That
least you did
is so funny.
it."
My husband is super supportive and he has never been that person to be like, "Oh, are you PMSing?" He doesn't do that. But it is funny because I feel like every couple goes through this. You have to get over the hump of like the buying the tampons.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, it doesn't phase him, but it was also something, a stigma for him. I
Mhm.
remember the first time I asked him, like, hey, can you pick me up a box of tampons? And he was like,
Oh.
no. What if someone sees me? And I'm like, so you're not buying them for yourself. You're probably buying them for your girlfriend or, whatever we were at that time. And I think it probably went away when we got married. And I just picture him like walking in, like buying it, like
It's like, yeah.
wedding ring, like this is for my wife. But I mean, I think that's something you mentioned earlier in the podcast, like for men and, like
Yeah.
women and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think it's something we're now super open. We went through, infertility for the past couple years. I don't know how much closer you can get with someone after that, but like that's something I think for men it shouldn't be weird either.
Mhm.
Right. And it being weird for them probably started with their dad, right? So we're talking
Probably.
generations of
Oh
this
Mhm.
yeah.
pattern. So we can't blame an individual person, and we can certainly try to do things like
Mhm.
small things, start with your friends or start with a small group that you trust and just
Mhm.
start saying it. Say mucus like 8 times
Mhm.
and it'll lose its right. Like the more
Mhm.
you say something, it's not going to be that interesting. So yeah, I
That
think
is true.
it's got to start with us, and then like that's again part of how we connected. Like I think you probably started it because she's way more open than I am, and then I was like, oh well, I can talk about this because she is too, right? So it just starts
Yeah.
with each of us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But
And
I
it's
think it
on that note too of the men. It's actually cool. We have a client right now who it's her and her fiance, so that
oh
he can be able
cool.
to do it and like hear what each cycle means and learn
Mhm.
alongside of her. And I think that is like the cool gold star. Like you get a
Yeah.
sticker. I think that's a really great couple like approach to fertility. Of it's
Mhm.
not just a woman's problem,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but really understanding what's going on in her body so that you can either cater to that or understand that as well.
Well, and I think, I think too, a lot of the fertility treatments I've gone through, my
Mhm.
husband has genuinely been like, so what's happening? Like, what does that mean? I remember like the biggest thing was like when we did our egg retrieval and they would call us every couple days and be like, okay, it's now fertilized. Okay, now it's a blastocyte. Okay, now it's an embryo at this stage and now we're testing it. And he was like, what does this mean? Tell me how this works.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when he gets home, I'm going to be like, let's sit down and talk about cycles. And I think like learning is cool and I think if anyone has that mindset, which I know he does, he's probably not going to be weirded out about it. He's going to be like, that's pretty cool. So you should be like PRing and running like some distance on day 1 and I'm going to be like, calm down.
Yeah.
Calm down. Not quite yet. So
You're so right. Things are going to be less scary the more we know about them. Things are going to be
for
less
sure.
icky or shameful the more you talk about
Mhm.
them. It's really just doing the opposite of that instinct. And for many of us, the instinct is hide, cover, don't talk,
Mm-hmm.
be scared. And so it's really just really acting opposite to that all the time.
Awesome. Well, where can people find you if they are open to a coaching session?
Yeah, we are on social media. Instagram is probably the thing we're on the most, which is cousins with a cause. And then we
Mm-hmm.
do have a website and an email, which are both to cousins with a cause. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's number 2,
Number
right?
two,
Thank you.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So I think it's great. I mean, anyone out there struggling with any phase of their cycle, whether it is trying to avoid getting pregnant or trying to get pregnant, or really just struggling with any part of reproductive health, I think it's a great conversation to have. And to Rebecca's point earlier, why not maybe weed out the things that you can control in your life before seeking out medical help? I know that I have often felt like I go to the doctor's office and I'm just a patient. They come in, the nurse is giving them a clipboard and they're like, okay, cool. What can I prescribe you? So I think this is a really great way to kind of like retake back ownership of like your body. And so anyone out there, if you are interested, I think this would be a great conversation. And this is super exciting. I mean, how cool would it be to say like, oh, hey, I've had periods my whole life, but in listening to my body and tracking my cycle and learning all of these things, I've been able to narrow it down to these maybe 3 things, or that it's not these 3 things.
Mhm.
So I think what you guys are doing is so awesome. And I think the energy and passion you have is fun. I mean, I've had a great time talking with you guys over the past hour.
Oh, thank you.
Same.
You too. And thank you, because you're obviously in the field of bringing awareness. And I think that's just what we have to keep doing,
Mhm.
right? I think there's
Absolutely.
a lot of voice these days. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's really exciting.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you everyone so much for spending your past hour with me and Cousins with a Cause. As they said, you can find them on Instagram at Cousins with a Cause or via email or website to Cousins with a Cause. And then if you all ever want to reach out to Everyday Infertility, you can find me on Instagram at Everyday Infertility, or feel free to email me at everydayinfertility@gmail.com. But that's it. We'll see you all next week. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Maddie.
Thank
Thank
you, Savannah.
you.